By this time he was a very old man, and there he is at Intervale with Ellen Day Hale, Nellie Hale, the great artist. And there are other photos of her in the same album with her easel and, at work up there. On May the 13th, 1908, Hale attended the opening of President Roosevelt's 3-day conference of governors at the White House. Chief Forester Gifford Pinchot was the prime mover for the conference, which was to become a seminal event in the history of conservation. It produced a presidential commission on the conservation of natural resources. Hale gave the invocation and must have heard Roosevelt's opening address, Conservation as a Duty, but he left Washington for Boston with his secretary that afternoon. He was now 86 and very frail. Even so, he managed a final visit to Hattie in Intervale that August with his daughter Nellie. Hattie Freeman was convinced, as were many others, that the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Joseph Cannon, was the real villain in holding up the bill. Congressman John W. Weeks of Massachusetts, who summered in the White Mountains and who had taken up the cause after being appointed by the Speaker to the House Committee of Agriculture, telegraphed in 1906, "Interview with Speaker Cannon does not indicate likelihood of consideration of the forestry bill. We have not given up yet, however." "I have," exclaimed Hattie, "and it makes me half sick with unhappiness. The Glen Road and all about Glen Ellis Falls are likely to go this winter. I don't see how you can have one word of justification for Cannon. I think that to all who love forests he will be thought of as much as an enemy of his country as Benedict Arnold or Jefferson Davis." And she was a continual goad to him. And he was getting old and not so much energy, and she goaded away in the letters. I bet he was saying, "Why didn't she go away?" And here we come back to this. Hale died at home in Roxbury on June the 9th, 1909. Hattie and Emma Cummings had departed for 6 months in Europe. She'd actually given up any hope of ever seeing anything of him because he was gone for 6 months in Washington. When he came home, his family were taking such care of him because he was so frail. But Hattie took the old man for one last drive, which he recorded with great joy in his diary, and that was another thing that I was so thrilled to find. I mean, a long paragraph about, this was the historic day Hattie Freeman came to see me and take me for a drive. While Hale's efforts to get the forestry bill considered by the Senate were more successful, Cannon obdurately persisted in holding the Weeks bill, as it was now known in the House, in the Rules Committee he controlled. But the recently deceased Senate chaplain's efforts were recognized by Forest and Irrigation, renamed Conservation briefly. His cover portrait, glorified by the open wings of an American eagle sitting on a conifer branch and ears of wheat, adorned the August issue, in which his final address to that year's Forest Congress was printed. So he got a great deal of recognition, and she got virtually, nothing, quite honestly. In January 1910, 7 months after Hale's death, Gifford Pinchot openly rebuked the new president, William Howard Taft, for allowing his newly appointed Secretary of the Interior, Richard Ballinger, to, as he saw it, stop the conservation movement. Taft promptly fired Pinchot, but from January to May, the US House of Representatives held hearings on the controversy. Nellie Hale told Hattie that she was attending those hearings in support of her father's good friend, Pinchot. Although the forestry bill was threatened by Pinchot's firing, things began to look up when Hattie's despised enemy, the obstructionist House Speaker Joseph Cannon, was stripped in March 1910 of his control of the Rules Committee. The House passed the Weeks Act on June 24, 1910, less than 5 months before losing control to the Democrats in the November midterm elections. The Senate passed the Appalachian White Mountains Forest Reservation Bill, on February the 15th, 1911, and it was signed by President Taft on March the 1st. Now the federal government was authorized to appropriate funds for the acquisition of lands and forest reserves, and some 30,000 acres were purchased as the first parcel toward the proposed 698,000-acre White Mountain National Forest. Hale would have greeted this news with a triumphant victory, victory, victory letter, to Hattie, which was his wont when things went really wrong. Right. How am I doing on time?
Fine.
Really? I got 3 more quick images, which I don't say much about. Those are actually our 2 little grandchildren from London, visiting 2 years ago, and our son and his wife had heard about my endless labours, so they thought they'd better visit the statue in the public garden in Boston. But the interesting thing to me, vis-a-vis this subject, is round the base are these words: man of letters, preacher of the gospel, prophet of peace, patriot, but no mention of pioneer conservationist. And I really think that this has come out pretty much in this research, don't you?
For sure.
The next thing. This is the best frontal portrait of Hattie as a... I know. You have to know it was something other than her looks. So this is her 1916 passport application.
Didn't want to mess with her.
No, I'm being awfully mean. That's really awfully mean, because everybody thought she was wonderful. But even somebody who was married to a Freeman descendant contacted me recently. He's a novelist, and he was terribly excited because when he was married to this Freeman descendant, he knew about Harriet Freeman because her grandfather adored her and was forever talking about her and saying, what a wonderful woman she was, and that she was the first woman to graduate from Harvard, which of course is completely untrue. But also that she was such a supporter of his wish to be an artist, and he was a very successful graphic artist. So it's nice to get a little more personal story like that. Well, I could mention that Hattie continued with her interest in land preservation and also historic preservation. I think she gave a great deal of money to both causes. But the one that many of you will have heard about is the Hetch-Hetchy controversy. The US Reclamation Service wanted to go ahead and dam the Hetch-Hetchy River in Yosemite National Park to provide water for San Francisco, which is not many years after the dreadful earthquake there. And John Muir, the great preservationist and president of the founder of the Sierra Club, was desperately against that because preservation was his great aim in life, and he had lived in Yosemite National Park for years and written marvelously about it. And this was devastating to him, but he lost the battle, and he died 2 years before the work started. But Hattie Freeman also wrote to a naturalist friend about this, so that's how I know that her interest continued. And one last, rather self-serving. Me in about 2008, having found Hattie's grave alongside her parents' grave. And at that stage I published an article about what I knew of the relationship, but I was frustrated because I didn't know enough about her really. And publishers were saying to me, well, who is this Harriet Freeman? And it got me riled because I knew she was someone extraordinary, but I had to do an enormous amount of additional research to prove that. So that's it.